Hey, what's going on, everybody? Today is Monday, March 25th, and you are listening and watching the Daily AI Show live. And today, as you might be able to see on our overlay there, we're talking about Apple's recent sort of abstract they put out, their paper they put out about their MM1 model. What does that mean? What is it? What are they doing as far as mixture of experts and the parameters, and why is it better or worse than other models out there? So yeah, that's kind of what we're talking about today because it's really interesting. I've got Jyunmi, Beth, Andy, and I'm Brian. And so yeah, I'm not quite sure, where to start this one, because not that I think there's a perception, right, guys, that Apple is like sort of maybe the sleeping giant, or they're not doing anything. And of course, we know that nothing could probably be farther from the truth. Whether Apple is actively, saying they're working on things in terms of AI, we can just assume that they are. Then also, though, we do see stories about, will the next versions of Siri and things like that be running off of Gemini Advanced, which is really interesting as well. So it's always kind of hard to tell what Apple's doing, other than we get big news like they've shut down their car, right? They're not going to be the Apple car anymore and stuff like that. But then they come out with a paper about this MM1 model. It's 30 billion parameters, which is tiny. If you haven't heard us talk about models and stuff like that, as comparatively speaking, that's a tiny model. But what is it? Why do they come out with this paper? Why do they feel like it's better? Sort of jumping into those areas. So is there any of you guys feel like you want to kind of take a stab? Andy, I kind of feel like you're always the one that, like, let me break this down. I kind of feel like I need an Andy breakdown of this. I don't know if I'm putting you on the spot, but I feel like that's what we need.
Not at all. I have a point of view on this.
Perfect.
So it's an emerging point of view, because not too long ago, I was feeling really sad about Apple seeming to capitulate in the AI space by saying, "Oh, we're going to put Gemini on the iPhone." Right? And I thought, "Oh, that's not a big announcement. That's what are you doing?" But as should be expected for Apple, Apple doesn't try to be the end all and be all of the fight for GPUs or for AI systems, generally speaking, but rather it's going to build a unified, integrated, perfectly well-suited, system for Macs and iOS. And so what they've done with the announcement of this MM1 model is they've revealed that they've made tremendous progress on getting to a system that's very powerful, small enough to run on device, and it works natively with the MM1 chip, or M1 chip sometime, but MM1 now is a system that includes a chip, which includes Apple's neural engine. It makes it better at running a small model. And by the way, the 30 billion is the largest of the MM1 models. It may not be that for certain functions on the iPhone or on Mac systems, you need to have a 30 billion parameter model. Could be a 7 billion parameter model that's running on your iPhone. So the other thing that's interesting about the MM1 model, in my view, is that it accomplished something with a carefully selected means of pre-training that is focused on a mix of data that results in an overall performance that's really, really great on a single prompt, but also is especially well tuned to vision. Think the iPhone camera now, vision, and the combination of vision and text. So, for example, on your iPhone, if you're pointing it at something, this model is going to be superior, state of the art, the paper says, on interleaving image and caption. Okay, so I pointed out and I say, just turn captions on, please, Siri. And now anything I point this at, tell me about it. And on the phone, it'll not only write the captions, but it'll speak it in text as well. So you can see this sort of custom, purpose-built combination of tools that Apple's developing that's going to work really well across Mac devices and iOS. And actually, the MM1 chip allows Mac devices to run iOS applications. So that's a nice little, addition to the thing. So let's talk for a minute about the M1 chip or the MM1 chip. So I mentioned now that it has iOS applications compatibility, but it also improves battery life because it's very, very power efficient. It has a memory architecture that's unified that enhances performance and efficiency. And its graphics performance is really excellent. Now, I read on the Hacker News, an exchange going back and forth with some, fanboys of Apple, and people were saying, "Oh no, they're never going to compare. This MM1 is never going to compare to the NVIDIA chips. Those are just way more powerful." But they don't need to be. The MM1 chip doesn't need to be more powerful. It just needs to be able to do what you're going to do on an iPhone, not what you're going to do to train large language models. You're not going to do that. So what we've got coming out of this is a chip with machine learning capabilities, tremendous graphic performance, killer graphic performance. And one of the comments that was in that thread was, looks like if you're going to be, wanting to put an LLM into local mode for privacy reasons and for bespoke applications that do this, you're going to be using Apple. Apple's going to do that. You're not going to spend $20,000 or $30,000 for a state-of-the-art NVIDIA chip and try to make that run on your local machine. That's way out of the ground. So I am now recharged my Apple fanboy status, and I'm really, really looking forward to what's going to happen on the iPhone and on my Macs. But it means I have to buy Macs that have the M1 chip in them, which is,
right.
I hate to keep doing it because my Mac is so good right now. That's kind of what the import of the MM1 development system is, as I foresee it's going to apply to iPhone and Mac.
Yeah, I think what I really got out of the paper release as well is sort of an indication of how Apple is approaching overall to their AI development. And Andy, you touched upon this a couple of times, but it seems like they're definitely going with the specific smaller model methodology as opposed to a giant, foundational type of model thing, which makes sense when you're combining it with your hardware. You have a huge user base. So you already have that hardware saturation or platform for its distribution, and I too was a little disappointed when I heard about the Google deal, and I was like, "What are you doing? Why do you want to put them on your devices?" But I heard some. What's that?
An Android developer on Apple.
Right, exactly, and I was thinking about it, and then I heard a bunch of other perspectives on this, and what I'm thinking is this is a great way to help train your users, right? And I think we've talked about this in the past, is your current user base doesn't have a huge exposure to LLMs and how it would integrate into their systems. You technically have the ChatGPT app. I don't know how much of that is in their install base, but if it's their default, just like how they make Google their default search engine for searching on the phones, having Google as being the default LLM on their phones will help get your consumer base at least practiced or accepting of, oh, this is part of the norm. This is how we're going to be using this on our day-to-day. And so I think that's a great way to position it, while you have what looks like your MM1 model is how everything works under the hood, right? This is all how your text and graphics and and especially how text in graphics is recognized and all of that methodology. And like you said, Andy, 30 billion is that's their largest model, right? They have smaller builds out. So I can really see them just implementing their own systems, MM1, as a background thing until they're ready to create, here's the Siri interface. Here's all our different Apple products. And as soon as they build in that, and this is a really good point, Andy, was that Macs can run iOS stuff. As soon as that integration across all of their product lines, it's that same concept of being able to take whatever I'm doing on my phone and putting it on my computer, which is putting it on my TV, and back and forth, and all of that interaction. I think that'll be that key shift for them, is once that happens, then it will be like an everyday for everyone. Will be the use of AI in all of their daily tasks.
Shortly after the announcement about the talks with Google to add Gemini to the phone, and by the way, I think it'll be something like Gemini Pro 1.5, that'll remove any question of context window. So you can just natter away at that LLM. It doesn't matter how long. And
I'm feeling a little called out here, Andy. Not supposed to be listening while I'm nattering away at my phone.
Right. But shortly after that, then they announced that, we're talking to Baidu. We're talking to something. They're going to go around the world and find the most used, like largest user base LLMs, and add those somehow into their ecosystem on the app side, right? So that's going to be the sort of the native app, but not the down at the hardware level native AI system, which is what MM1 and MM1 LLM is. I think that I see that as their strategy. They would have to, in order to go over to China, for example, for the Chinese iPhones. They couldn't put in their own LLM. They're going to have to cooperate with every one of these sort of regions that they're working with and have their LLMs, which have a bunch of additional feature sets on them. When you have a system like OpenAI, there's, custom GPTs, and you have, or Perplexity, for example, you develop a profile on that system that knows something about you. But the Apple system is going to know a lot of private stuff about you locally on your phone that isn't shared with big servers in the cloud. So that's going to be the thing that's going to make you want an iPhone, because you're going to have a local LLM native inside that chip and the LLM that's running in there. It's all going to be your own data.
So two things that I'm thinking. One is that the M1 chip is actually the older Apple chip, right? So this is designed to run on last year's stuff and the year before's high-end stuff, because the M2 chip is now what's in the new things coming. M3. Carl is saying M3. I'm now way behind in my M2 chips. But of course the this coming out that functions on that hardware means that it's working across the board. And the other thing that I think is kind of interesting is the comparison to the Rabbit, right? So when the Rabbit came out, there were a bunch of people who were like, we all have cameras in our phones. Why do we not just do this on a phone? And part of the answer to that was that no one has done what the Rabbit could do on a phone. And it seems like Apple is, why don't you just do it on your phone? It's already in your pocket.
Here's a list of the Mac systems that you can buy right now that have the M1 chip, and so are already capable of doing a local large language model when it is available to you, or even like Mistral 7B, you could probably run on any one of these systems with the appropriate level of memory. The MacBook Air, the MacBook Pro, but only the 13-inch model. I don't know why that is, right? That's the only one that has the M1 chip in it. The Mac Mini, the iMac, and the 24-inch model. So I happen to be right now on an iMac 27-inch model, older, like 5, 6, 7 years ago. But you can get the M1 chip in the 24-inch iMac now. And then the iPad Pro, that'll have the M1 chip here. And it currently does. You can buy the iPad with the M1 chip.
Yeah,
So
a lot of hardware on there.
Cool.
There's one thing that when I remember, we all know the reason why Apple went with the M1 chip, right? It's to unify everything, and essentially they have full control of the all the aspects, and it delivers the performance, because I know editing speed is so much faster. Battery life is amazing. I was a little surprised because, and maybe it's right, everyone says that Apple's behind on their large language model, but with the release of the 0101 Lite, you can kind of tell, okay, imagine if Apple has control of the large language model and they have connected it to Siri. It doesn't take that much of a leap to be, you have voice control over your Mac and your phone all at the same time. And what we're talking about, right, is what the 01 Lite does, where, hey, I want you to open my app, send an email, I want you to do this, and so on. So I was a little surprised, because that integration, it doesn't take that much of a leap, or someone in Apple's AI division to think through that entire process. So that's kind of what it makes sense for Apple to do, that, to connect everything together. So that would be the thing that I guess I'd be waiting for.
Yeah.
The other thing that is talked about in the paper, and is referenced when people are talking about the paper, is multi-image reasoning, so that it can pull in multiple images and reason. So it makes sense to me that it's going for other people's multimodal models, right? So Gemini is also supposedly a multimodal model. So it would make sense that if your iPhone is your input, or your Apple product is your input, that you can also bridge that to a multimodal model like Gemini, or like the China models are actually ahead of us in terms of vision reasoning. And one of the podcasters that I was listening to this weekend was like, well, if you're looking at like the amount of visual data that you have to reason with, China is like ahead of us on
They've got cameras everywhere. That's right.
Cameras everywhere, and they own that data, right? Like that data is accessible to tech companies. So,
I
but
think China's answering a whole lot of questions about how did you train your model. They're like, you know how we trained our model.
We did.
we don't have to say it. I wanted to bring in Greg's comment here. Thank you, Greg, as always. He said, I see the Gemini thing as a way to preempt the inevitable monopoly claims that will come out once they drop the MM1. Offer everything else as everyone else, I think. Offer everything everyone else has to prove they aren't closed, and make the far superior performance of MM1 an Apple perk. Interesting one. And then I just had another comment on here, and he's saying, Apple, they aren't behind their head. They have been working on this for a long, long time. The neural engine developed to support this has been built into silicon for a long time, and has the AR capabilities. Yeah, I'll just comment on that. I seem to agree. I mean, there's the public perception, right? Which is, in today's world, we do have to acknowledge that with AI, if you haven't announced something in AI in like 4 weeks, people are like, where'd you go? Like, and maybe if not 4 weeks, 8 weeks is you're starting to strain it. We just saw this with Claude, right? Like or Anthropic, the company, where there just wasn't a whole lot for a while. And people were starting to go, what's on Anthropic? And all of a sudden they put out their 3 models, and everybody's like, Claude is the best. Claude, and then everybody's back on the Claude train or whatever. And we go through this. The show goes through this because we pay attention to it. To everybody else, the general public, I would imagine they probably feel the same as what Greg is saying, is like, Apple's not behind. Apple's just doing what Apple does, which is they're not usually the first. They I don't want to say sit and wait. They just really do a good job of assessing the market, figuring out what that thing is that you cannot live without, and then delivering on that with sleek design and all the things that Apple has been known for years and years and years. And we've seen this over and over again. Also, this isn't necessarily new territory as far as like Google. I mean, I remember when Google Maps wasn't on, you couldn't get Google Maps on your phone. Like Apple forced you to use Apple Maps, and it's gotten better. But when Apple Maps first came out, it damn near sends you into a river. Like Apple Maps was awful. Like the fact that they would even like released it was amazing to me. Like it's kind of like it's troubling. It's gotten better, obviously, but they were way, way, way at that time behind Google Maps. But you couldn't get Google Maps on your phone, and I remember that being a huge issue for me. So,
Right.
Are they opening up more? Is it like what Greg is saying as far as they see a play here? Using Gemini. I'm a little concerned about Gemini being the one they went with, or they might potentially go for over others. But that's my own opinion. And Greg's also saying, hey, they are in the AI business. They're in the customer experience business. Well, exactly, right? I mean, Apple is all about the customer experience and, pulling the iPod out of the pocket. Steve Jobs, iconic, a million songs in your pocket, or 1,000, maybe he said. I can't remember what his first words are, but standing with his skinny jeans on the stage and pulling that, the iPod out of the pocket is like, that's in my brain. I remember that, happening. So I agree with that. That's like, Apple's about the experience and what they're doing. So this is really interesting. So I'm curious, like, as we sort of think about this MM1 model, do you guys see this as, because you guys are obviously way more knowledgeable about the tech and the different transformers and things like that, but is this something we expect to see move quickly towards being able to deploy on an iPhone? I would imagine that is exactly where they want to go with this. I would imagine, to your point, Jyunmi, or whoever said about the rabbit, that's exactly it. I kind of expect these things to be quickly washed over because the iPhone will just be able to do it. So I'm just curious, is this where you see it going? Is this going? And also my follow-up to that is this something that's like far enough along that we might hear about it as far as Siri is concerned at their dev conference in a couple of months? Sounds like Jyunmi, you have an answer for that. Go for it.
Well, that's what I was going to say. We'll find out in June. We'll find out in June
what's 3 months away, Jyunmi.
What our expectation is from Apple rolling things out, because because there's a lot of buildup around that.
I kind of like Apple's response, because what you said, Brian, was that we're now in the, hey, where's OpenAI's GPT 4.55, whatever it is, right? And it's like, oh, so what happened to Llama 3? What happened to this? It's nice that Apple's like, hey, we don't have to play that race, because everybody knows we're not like, oh, Apple's behind. No, like they don't care. They literally like, okay, Samsung has always had, or the Pixel has always had the better tech on their phone. It didn't matter, right? It never mattered. Like I remember, I think I had a Galaxy 2, and it had a bunch of features that, yes, it was more advanced than Apple, but I never used it. So I think like that thing has been ingrained. It's like, oh yeah, you have all these things, but really, does anybody use it? So we're going to build it in a way that, here is what most people would want to do. And then it's always happens that people are like, oh, well, Samsung's had that, Claude's had that. But it doesn't matter, because most people don't care. The only people who care are
unless you do, right?
Yeah.
If you're an Android person and you care about having it first, I mean, God knows all of the different camera tech has been way more advanced on the Android side. And absolutely. You see those commercials, I mean, just the commercials, and you go, I can't do that, or whatever the case is. And then Apple's usually 2 or 3 years models, let's say, behind on it. Yeah. And then the fun part about Apple is they announce it as if they invented it. That's always my favorite part with Apple. When they do decide to come out with it, you would think they invented it. It was the first time anybody saw it. That's always funny to me. But again, it's about the show. It's about the lights. It's the greatest showman. It's like the song, the dance. That's Apple's thing. That's what they do well. So Anyway, I was about to.
You're right. Yeah. Sorry, Beth.
There's also the other side of training your customers, right? Training your people.
Yeah.
You can increase Siri's capacity to like 3.5 Chat GPT,
Yeah.
and we will be like, oh my God, it's
Yeah.
so much better. Right.
Well,
So like we have
a
been
high bar.
trained to have fairly low expectations and frustrated. I mean, I think that the majority of people who are experiencing what actual AI is like are frustrated with Siri's capacity, but she does not need to be GPT-5 level for people to be
No.
happy with it.
Yeah,
No.
I'm hesitant to use this analogy, but the way that Apple releases things and announces things for its customer base is basically Apple love bombs. So, so it's always, this is giving us a problem. This is giving us a problem. Okay, now it's awesome. They come back with, this is fantastic. It's like, okay, then it falls off and falls. It's like, now it's fantastic again. So, while the methodology is entertaining to watch from the outside, of course, but they are really good, like you said, Brian, at the whole show. It really is an ecosystem for them, right? I wouldn't necessarily call Samsung an ecosystem or a platform or a framework or anything like that. They're just a very large manufacturer of cell phones, right?
Yeah.
So it's a completely different user experience. So it's sort of like what was Greg was saying is it really is what is the best experience we can give to all of our customers at any one time.
Yeah. One thing that we always look at too is so what, in addition to the show, when you go to an Apple store, you have the Genius bar or whatever that is, but you can learn about it, right? They have like a little amphitheater, and you can. I think that's, to me, I'm really hopeful that when they integrate some of the stuff, they have the education component as part of it, so people really understand how to use it. Which right now most people like they'll use a little bit of it. So using Siri to actually do more complex tasks than you ever done, that can be taught to so many different people in the Apple way, which is very simple. Everybody, I never knew that. And you still hear that when you go into an Apple store and they're describing a very basic feature, but I never knew that you could do that. That's what Apple, I think, is going to be good at. So I'm hoping that's how you bring everybody on board together. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of like, that's exciting because you don't see that with Google. You don't see that with Microsoft. It's sort of like they're racing as fast as they can, but there's very little education on the back end of it, which I think Apple does a better job of. And so maybe instead of Apple being at the forefront, Apple's like the sweeper. They sweep like in a race or whatever, they sweep everyone forward. So everyone can actually take advantage of the benefits, no matter how like advanced it is.
Now, I will throw this out there because I just looked this up because I wasn't sure. I definitely didn't know this. My question in Google was Siri or Alexa first? And I was pretty sure it was Siri, but I wasn't 100%. So I just found this really quick in a Medium article, assuming this Medium article is correct. We'll assume it is. It said just in the early 2010s, just only 2 months after Watson's success on Jeopardy, where IBM's Watson was on Jeopardy, Apple introduced Siri to the world. Then conversational assistants began to pop up like mushrooms after the rain. Yep. 2012, Google Assistant. 2013, Cortana. 2014, Amazon Alexa. 2016, Google Home. 2017, Bixby, which I don't even know what Bixby is. But that's really interesting because I'm not saying Apple was first or whatever, but Siri really is going on like it sounds like the 13-year mark, something like that since it first came out, which is really, really impressive. I didn't realize that Alexa was almost, it sounds like, based on depending on the dates, maybe 2-3 years after Siri. I didn't realize that Alexa is only coming up on its decade mark, which is really, really interesting. So, yeah. So listen, I think, go ahead, Beth.
I have a prediction. For the summer. I believe we will be in a lot of conversations with our Muggle people who are not like deep into the AI world, who are like, see, now if ChatGPT could do this, like what Siri can do, I would have wanted that. And we're going to be in a lot of conversations where like, no, but it could. Right. Like it does. It's just not named Siri in your pocket. Right. Like, well, I get you, but I feel like there's going to be an awakening of like,
Mm.
oh, this is what AI is. And if, and if the other AIs could do this, I might be interested in them. And
So,
okay.
so Beth, what would you say in a percentage bump of adoption by mass usage? What are you thinking after this summer? If you're making predictions,
Oh, I think it's going to be 50% of people will say that they use AI, right?
oh
Like
wow,
by like they will have an understanding that actually they've been using AI the whole time by asking Siri what time it is, right?
right.
That is an AI function. But I think it'll bump up. I'm not sure that in terms of like the clients that we talk to and the training and the knowledge of what AI can do, that will be a huge bump. But I think people's perceptions of themselves as people who use AI will jump if they reveal that Siri is greater capacity. Yeah,
Funny,
Carl.
Beth, that you mentioned people use AI. There's too many people that we've done discovery presentations with when we hear, oh, our team uses AI, and then we dig deeper and they're like, oh yeah, just ChatGPT free, right? So
Yeah.
you're right. Like the moment I can use Siri, I don't know how good Apple's marketing is in terms of connecting Siri to AI. Like
Mm.
they'll probably do a good job to connect that together. But then once they do, then everybody will say, I use AI because I
Yep.
use Siri, which means I use AI. And
Mm.
I'm just hoping I have an Alexa at home, which is so terrible. I was like, hey, could you just give Alexa something, like some sort of upgrade, like anything, GPT-2? I don't know, whatever, but it's really terrible. Like it cannot, I recognize anything. So just something, Amazon, just a little something that's
My prediction, since Beth made one, is that whatever the advancement is past June with Siri, it will still annoy my father-in-law. He'll still get angry at it and probably still throw it out in the yard. That's my prediction. That's where I feel like this is going regardless. So
A lot will change. A lot will stay the same.
the more it stays, we'll stay the same. All right, we'll wrap it up there, guys. Thanks for joining in. Thanks, Greg, for hanging out with our conversation. Hopefully, you learned something about Apple's MM1 model. I always want to say chip, but it's their model, their mixture of experts model, and what they're doing. Google. Apple has not gone anywhere. They're not behind. If anything, they're right in the hunt, and I'm sure, as Greg said, whatever they release will be, in full benefit of having a better user experience, because that's what they do very, very well. So we'll wrap it up there. We got a whole bunch of shows coming up this week. In fact, I want to just pull them up here. Tomorrow, we're going to be talking and doing more of a deep dive into Sam Altman's conversation with Lex Friedman, because during that podcast, which, by the way, go listen to, Lex Friedman always does a good job, but maybe listen on 1.5 because it's slow. Is
long.
Cool. We're going to help you not listen to that. How about that? That's what we're going to dive into tomorrow. I talk about all the individual things from Sora to Q-Star to different parts that Sam talked about, where they sort of fall in line. We'll give you the timeline of what's going on with OpenAI. Wednesday, we got the news. Thursday, we're talking about something similar today, which is evolutionary model merge. That is super cool. Come back on Thursday if you want to learn something really, really cool about what some people have been doing with this evolutionary model merge. And then Friday, we're going to be doing our review of Claude, which we were just talking about. So what has Claude changed? What are they doing with their 3 models? What have we played with? What do we like? All that'll be coming up on Friday. So there's the whole week. And until then, come on back tomorrow and we'll see you. Bye.
Aloha.
Ugh.